From Los Angeles, we'll interview Alexander Hamilton. You want to bet? We are going to interview Alexander Hamilton right here. This could be a scoop. Right back with it. Back in the book segment tonight, we continue our series, Bloviating with Bill, where regular folks get to slap me around verbally. Our guest today is an attorney named Alexander Hamilton. Of course, the original Mr. Hamilton was a founding father, born in Nevis, the West Indies. The fact is, Alexander Hamilton is a firm believer in affirmative action. Let the bloviating begin. Okay, Alexander Hamilton, Dr. Hamilton, all right? I don't know anything about Aaron Burr. I've never heard of the man. This is going to be a nice conversation. Now, I agree with you that affirmative action is necessary in the United States, but I want to base it on income level. I want no color involved, because I don't believe color is the American way. We should be dividing or separating or evaluating anybody on color. Where am I going wrong?
Well, the problem is, if you believe that, then we would have to go back to the history and the foundation of this country, because there's always been affirmative action in this country, always been racial preferences. We only begin to debate the issue when the preferences switch from whites to blacks.
I won't argue with that blacks have had a much tougher time. But right now, isn't it incumbent on the country to be fair to everybody, as fair as the country can be to everybody? And if the country's colorblind and just goes for the poverty level, people below a certain, students in a family below a certain income level, they get extra credit because it's harder for them, no matter what color they are. Why isn't that the way to go?
The problem is that argument in that standpoint is ahistorical. It ignores the history of discrimination and racism in this country, i.e. slavery, civil rights, Jim Crow, and all of the above.
You want not only affirmative action, but you want the present government to right the wrongs of the past.
Well, I think it's not necessarily, I want the federal government to necessarily go around, as for example with reparations, handing out checks to people. But I think that there's no way that you can logically argue that if you have almost 300 plus years of de facto discrimination and de jure racism, that you can remedy it simply with affirmative action that only even benefits the top 15%.
Okay, but look, I can make a case for white people who lost ancestors fighting to free the slaves, that their lives were inalterably measured because their kids didn't have a father. Or, you can make that case. So what I'm trying to tell you is this. History is never going to be righted. Ever. But right now, it's incumbent upon us, Americans, to be fair to everybody on an equal basis. And you can have affirmative action that benefits poor blacks without the color scheme.
But we still have it. Example, in the affirmative action cases that went down with the University of Michigan, there was so much talk about quotas. But I believe since the history of this nation was founded, for example, with your alma mater, Harvard University, in 1636, they have always maintained a 90+% ratio of whites to other minorities.
But it wasn't a quota. It was.
But that is a quota.
It was in the sense that it was unwritten. But now, look, the Supreme Court has ruled quotas unconstitutional. That's never going to happen.
But it is happening. I mean, that's the point that I'm making.
It did happen.
If the top universities right now, and you can go all the way back to 1636, as I've said, have maintained a 90+% white majority, that's a quota.
It's not a written down quota.
But the effect,
that's what I'm trying to tell you.
But would you argue with me that the effect is just the same?
I would argue that there has not been fairness toward African Americans in any area in this country. We're trying to do that now. We're getting places, but to divide the country now by insisting that blacks have a certain number that have to be admitted to universities, I think is destructive. One more question. You say you're against reparations for slavery. Well, if you want social injustices to be righted, why not give blacks a big check?
Let me clarify what I mean by that. If reparations means that we're going to go around carte blanche handing out checks from the United States governments to African Americans, I'm opposed. But
why?
If reparations, well, because I don't think necessarily that will solve the problem. I think that would be akin to a known neighborhood drug addict walking up to me outside of the local store and asking me for money when I know he's probably going to take that and go smoke it up or drink it up. My point is this. If reparation means closing the educational, academic, technological, and economical divide, then I'm for it. But if it's just going around handing out checks to individuals, I'm not.
Because it doesn't solve the long-term problem.
Right.
Dr. Alexander Hamilton, everybody. How can you argue with a guy named Alexander Hamilton? Well, Aaron Burr did. You did very well, Doctor, and it was a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you, sir.
I enjoyed talking to him.